Hey everyone, Eben here. So as you may know, I've been working on my own brush pack recently, and I'm very happy to say that today that brush pack is finally available. You can download it from the link in the description below. And today I just wanted to take a minute to go through some of those brushes, talk a little bit about where they came from and what I might use them for, and how you can use them to improve your own artworks. So without further ado, let's just dive in and try some of these out. Alright, so I've got my canvas here. I'm working at around 2000 by 3000 pixels here, which is about around the resolution I might usually be using for a painting. The key with a lot of these is they have some really nice high resolution shapes that you can work from, so they work really well on any scale. So let's just go over some of these real quick. I have 28 brushes here, and including a number of mixer brushes, some custom textural brushes that we'll get into in a little bit, and a lot of just nice varied textured kind of painterly brushes that I use in my workflow. So I've also included 3 different erasers here. Not that that's like the selling point of this pack here, but I find it's just really useful to have these available. These are like the only 3 types of erasers that I might ever need, and it's really nice to just have them kind of handy in your brush menu to just click on them and use them whenever you need to. So let's start with the first one, which is the builder brush, and I've actually had quite a few questions about this one in some of my live streams because it's deceptively simple. You can see the shape here. It's just kind of your standard brick. And it has no transfer setting on it, so it's completely opaque whenever you apply it. And really the only thing I use this for is it can be useful for blocking out silhouettes of things and keeping a bit of a nice sort of feathered edge to it. But primarily what I would use it for is creating quick lines around things to map out things like buildings, or even just to create a quick sketch. When you hold down Shift while using this brush, you can you hit the brush down in one section, you hold down Shift and bring it to another section, and you can create these really nice crisp lines that you can then use to roughly map out. For example, if you're trying to sort of create some perspective lines in a piece, you can very easily set these up, and then if you want to maybe map out some buildings along there, you can very quickly just start to map these out. Using this method. So let's move on to our pencil here, and I guess I've tried a lot of different pencil brushes, and sometimes they will have roughly the equivalent feel, but I really spent a lot of time trying to get this to feel as close to an actual pencil as possible. So if we put it on a dark gray color here, I can zoom in a little bit so you can see. It starts off, you can be very light about it and create this very delicate shading, and when you zoom in, that shading still has a lot of texture to it. And then the more pressure, this is a pressure sensitive brush, so the more pressure you apply, the more the more that texture is going to go away. It's going to get more of a solid stroke in it, and the more opaque it will be. Let's move on to the next one here. This one I actually created a while back because I felt like there was a very specific need for it. I just noticed that if I ever wanted to create some kind of 3-dimensional like flat space, like the side of a building or like a rock face, a lot of the brushes, they have sort of a equal weight no matter which direction or which angle you apply them with. So with this one, I've created it so it's sensitive to changes in your brush orientation or in your pen orientation. So as you can see here, as I turn my pen, I can change the orientation of this brush, and it's very flat, so I can create a very nice crisp thin line, and then also work down and create a much thicker surface from there. So it has a lot of potential applications. You can make a lot of interesting sort of flowy shapes with this, if you're ever trying to create like a banner or something like that, flapping in the wind there. But primarily what I would like to use it for is sort of just mapping out those types of surfaces I was describing earlier, those kind of, let's create a bit of a gradient here. Make sure we have the right one selected. And I'll show you what I mean. If I'm trying to map out some light hitting a surface like that, I want to just be able to, like, without switching up the brush, just create some variability in how those surfaces are represented here. So we have that very slim upper plane where the light is hitting directly, and then we can immediately just go down from there and create some nice textural variation, or just sort of map out some. This is really nice for some kind of rocky canyon or something like that. Let's move on here. We have the rough comb brush, which as you may have noticed, I really like having a lot of texture in my brushes. Even with this one, there's still some, I mean, at that scale it's a little digital looking, but even with this brush there's a little embedded texture in it, and I like to have that in all of my brushes. So when we go to the rough comb here, as I've called it, this brush has a lot of nice texture, but it also has these sort of jagged faded edges to it that really make it look like an actual paintbrush stroke here. So this one's just so much fun. I'm not sure exactly what I intended to use it for, but things like, again, it would be very useful in setting up a landscape. Let's set up a gradient here again. Let's just make a nice nice gradient between a sky blue, and there you go. So say you wanted to create some rolling hills here, kind of start with this and start to fade in your lighted areas. It just maintains a lot of that nice feathered texture, and that is preserved at higher resolutions as well. And let's move on to this dry brush. This is just sort of another fairly versatile brush that the key here is it's similar to a lot of your standard transfer digital brushes, but it has this embedded texture that makes it very grainy, which could be useful in a variety of different ways. But you'll see when I just sort of give it a regular stroke, it does build up, and the more you use it, the less grain will appear there. But it's just a great general purpose brush for, you know, if you want to be sketching out your underpainting or anything like that without losing your texture, or just working on any part of your painting while using this. You're not going to end up losing any of the texture you've set up. It's just going to keep applying more of this texture wherever you want it, and it's going to give your whole piece a nice painterly look. And alright, let's move on to the textured transfer brush here. And so let's bring down our background color a bit here. This one I've sort of created as an alternative to the dry brush. This doesn't have a lot of embedded texture, so you can actually create a very nice, soft, smooth effect with this. This is probably the closest thing I have to a lot of the conventional digital brushes that I've used in the past from other creators, because it does have that transfer setting on. It's pressure sensitive, so you can create some very light strokes with it, and it's not too grainy. It can be very smooth, and you can really use it to work up some smoother areas in your painting. But at the same time, it does have a bit of texture, especially around the edges, you can see here, and that's just again going to help to give your whole piece a much more painterly look. It's going to make it much more interesting with all this added texture. This one, the Big Thick, this is my favorite brush of the whole pack. This one was inspired by some of the Greg Rutkowski brushes, and he got me really into, or the brushes got me really into creating color variation in a brush. So I kind of took that concept and I pushed it even further. This brush has a lot of great color variation in it, which right off the bat is going to give your strokes a lot more interest, a lot more texture. It's got a really nice, crisp, well-defined textured edge, which holds up even at a really large scale. So this is great for, even if you're just starting out a painting. You may have seen some of my other videos where I will just start out with a lot of loose texture and color just like this. You fill up your painting with something like this, you're gonna just have a really great starting point for the rest of your piece. It's just gonna make things really interesting right off the bat. Likewise, or alternatively, I should say, you can use this for just painting regular details into your piece. It's completely opaque, so which I love, because it really forces you to be careful and deliberate about your color choices. And this is a great way to build your color picking skills as well, because you can't rely on all that smoothing and blending to get the right feel in your piece. But I just love this because it's thick, it's interesting, and it's really great for, I often use this in the beginning phases of my painting, because it just gets a lot of nice texture and color variety down right away, and it's very I don't know, it's just fun. I've also made a similar brush, but for more specific sort of detailed applications. So this is the thin dry brush, and it has a similar level of color variety in it, as you can see here, and but it has this tapered, pressure sensitive shape dynamic quality as well. And let's move on to the brick stroke. This is sort of similar to the thick dry, but it's based around a square brush tip. So it's completely opaque, but it has a lot of nice texture on it that is also pressure sensitive. So this has a number of applications. You can use it for blocking in a way that will still preserve some texture. If you're just creating you know, a wall of a building or something like that, you know, you can keep a lot of this this texture even in simple blocking applications. Let's move on to our next brush here. Big Thick Wet. That's right. It's very similar to the Big Thick Dry, but it is a mixer brush. So we take the same texture and we apply it to a mixer brush with a high load setting, and it has a 60% wet setting, which means it's gonna mix really well on your canvas for with paint that you've already put down. And this is, I think, you know, one of the brushes I've made here that gets the closest to the actual feeling of using oil on your canvas. It's very smooth. It still has the texture of a brush, but it has the feeling of using that brush on wet paint. So if you're going for a really traditional oil paint kind of vibe here, this is a great one for you. I've designed a lot of these brushes with the traditional artist in mind, so people that might be new to digital painting, who aren't like totally comfortable with all of the tools that are available in this medium. I've created a lot of these brushes for you so that you can just sort of jump right in. You have all of your tools available, it's simplified, it's ready to go, so you can just start painting as soon as you open Photoshop. So let's move on to our next mixer brush. This is the thin brush wet, equivalent to the thin brush dry. So often I will switch between these for various applications, but same kind of principle. It is designed to mimic your traditional thin brush stroke on a wet canvas. And let's move on to the remixer, as I call it here. This is another sort of almost oil paint-like brush, but it has a very unique function, which is it will take the paint that's already on your canvas and sort of mix it out and create a lot of really interesting variation. This would be a great one for building clouds and things like that. As you can see here, it almost naturally forms this cloud shape, but it's also really great if you just want to, if you're just starting your canvas and you just want to create some nice variation and some texture and just sort of blend things around a little bit. It's great for if you've created a lot of detail. I talk about this all the time. If you create a lot of detail in your piece, sort of all over the place, and you want to take some of that detail and reduce it or blend it out so the viewer can focus more on your high priority focal areas, you can use this brush to blend out those sections, but without losing that key texture that you would lose if you used something like the smudge tool. Let's go to the Super Chop. So this is kind of the beginning of my more custom application brushes. They can be used for whatever purpose you want to, but they are designed with some specific things in mind. This one is more of just a general texture brush that I created. I also modeled this one off of some of the things I was seeing from the Greg Rutkowski pack, but I sort of did my own take on it here. This is called the Super Chop, and as you can see, as I do an even stroke here, it's doing a lot of different things. All the strokes are spaced out, but they still have a lot of nice texture to them, and there's a bit of color variation going on, so no matter what you're using this brush for, it's going to give you just a little bit of color variety, which is going to help your strokes have a lot more interest. And oh, I love this one. I call this the brush dabs. Could also be the tree brush or whatever you want to call it. This one's great. It's pressure sensitive, so if you just do a little light tap, you're gonna get all these little bits here. But if you give it a good press, it's gonna give you a nice big, highly textured sort of mossy tree shape. And you can alternate between those pressure levels to create a lot of interesting variation really quickly. If you're creating like moss or some kind of organic surface, or kind of like what I'm doing here, just sort of a tree that's being hit with some sunlight. And again, it also has that color variation, so no matter what you're doing, it's just going to create a little bit of variety, and it's really going to help create realism and interest in your piece here. Let's go to the foliage brush. Actually, let's go back to this layer down here, because maybe you can see it in context a bit more. This brush works very similarly, but it has this nice high resolution custom foliage brush. It's also Just like the last one, it is tilt sensitive, so as I'm moving my pen here, I can change the direction to whatever it is I want to be, whatever angle I want to be working on at the time. So I can use this to just create a nice, quick impression of leaves wherever it is I'm painting, whether it's a forest floor or whether it's a tree-like object like this. I can go at a lot of different scales. It is slightly pressure sensitive, so I can create some smaller leaves and then create some nice bigger ones here. This one is called the brick drop, and it's got that square brush that you were seeing earlier, but it has this scatter setting, and it just creates a lot of these uniform but textured sort of squarish shapes, and you can use this for so many different things, to create the impression of a cityscape or something from a distance, or some buildings in a town, or if you just want to give a surface that you're working on some interesting texture, make it look sort of like a cobblestone or something like that. I can take that, I can transform it. Now I can use this as perhaps the side of a building with the perspective, or I could use it as a walkway, something like that, if I use the warp tool a little bit. So let's start with another layer here, and let's move on to the rock drop, which is very similar, but it has these nice high resolution rock impression textures here. This one is also very pressure sensitive, so the lighter I touch, the smaller these little rocks are going to be, but if I push down a little more, I'm going to get these nice big shapes. Really great for any section of your painting where you're just trying to create a quick impression of some rock activity here. It's a light spatter brush, and this is really great for a lot of things. If you just want to create some quick texture, this is a nice high resolution brush that will work well at high scales as well as in very small specific applications. It's very good for I like to use it for if I'm doing a portrait or something. You can use this to create some nice like skin variation or anything like that, you know, freckles or whatever it is. Or if you're just creating any kind of surface, something that's gritty or like maybe some concrete, it's just really nice to use this, throw some texture in there, and make it look a bit more realistic. And I also have a heavy splatter brush as well, which is very similar. Here's the big paint splatter. So yeah, enough said there. Let's move on. This is the Trails brush, which is really great for if you're creating grass or hair texture or anything like that. So unlike a lot of other similar brushes like this, it has a dual brush mode built in, so that some of those, you can see here, some of these edges around the side of the stroke will kind of fade in and out, and that will create some nice variation for your brush. Alright, let's move on to the textured soft round. I made a little demo of this a while back, but I can show you real quick what I would use this for. It's great for skin applications, that kind of thing. I can show you the brush itself over here. It's just like your regular soft round brush, only it has all this great texture built into it. So if you like using the soft round brush for a variety of things like I do, but you don't want to have that kind of washed out, like blurred digital look to it, this is a great brush if you're trying to do create lighting with the linear dodge mode, or if you want to give your rounded sort of soft areas just a little bit more texture. Let's go to our watercolor brush. Maybe I'll use a white background for this, since it's typically what you would be using for your watercolor applications. This one is slightly translucent, and it does build, so it acts just like a regular watercolor brush. And so if you're used to working with watercolors in a traditional sense, this is a great brush that you can use to sort of replicate that effect. Let's get another one that I made specifically because I kept seeing opportunities for this and the need for this to be in my work, and I never had a brush that could really properly do it. This is the Circle of Confusion brush, and that is actually the technical term for this lighting effect. And essentially, it's the sort of thing you would see if someone has taken a picture of something in focus, but there's a distant light source that is out of focus. That light will tend to bloom into these little circles that you will see behind your main object of focus. And I've created this brush specifically for that purpose, with this nice high resolution kind of diffused lighting circle that will sort of build upon itself and really create a nice convincing Circle of Confusion look. Alright, so this next brush is the light beam brush, and this is something I created that I haven't seen in a lot of other packs so far. It's a high resolution light brush that right as soon as you select it, it's set to linear dodge mode, and it's going to create these nice high resolution light beam effects. So this is a great thing to do as your part of your finishing touches for a piece, or if you just want a quick way to see how that lighting would look during your sketch phase. It's a really great way to do this. You can apply it in any color and get a lot of really cool light dynamic effects. Similarly, I have the light flare brush, which is another brush that's based off of a high resolution image, and so you can use it at a really large scale, and that's just going to create this beautiful light flare that you can use as a sun in your piece, or any small reflections of the sun, or spotlights, or anything like that. Any kind of really cool light glare you're trying to include in your piece, you can use this brush to create that effect. And it's pressure sensitive, and you can sort of build it up very slowly to get this pretty overwhelmingly intense light effect if you use it enough. And of course, eventually it'll just all be white here. Alright, so that's it for this brush demo. And so what I'm going to do next is I'm going to try to create a piece using only these brushes, and I'm going to show you exactly how I would use them in my process and how they're going to benefit your painting if you use them as well. So let's move on to the next part of the demo.